Hello, welcome to End Slavery Tennessee's Human Trafficking 101. The mission of End Slavery Tennessee is to promote healing of human trafficking survivors and strategically confront slavery in our state. Our vision is to create a slave-free Tennessee. As we begin, think of what your idea of what human trafficking is, what you have seen, what you have heard, and especially how it's been depicted in media, movies, TV. Actually, you may be surprised by what you think at the end of this presentation. Many of you have already heard of human trafficking through the news and elsewhere, but after this presentation, hopefully you will understand what human trafficking involves, and not only its impact on communities as a whole, but the tremendous trauma suffered by its many victims. So what exactly is human trafficking? The U.S. Department of Justice defines human trafficking as an act or attempted act of recruiting, transporting, transferring, harboring, or receiving a person by force, fraud, coercion, or abduction for the purpose of exploitation. However, any minor used for sex in exchange for anything of value is a trafficking victim, and no force, fraud, or coercion need be present or proven. Human trafficking is the second largest and fastest growing crime, directly behind drug trafficking, and the trafficking of minors is the largest sex crime. However, we found that some recent reports state that human trafficking has surpassed the illegal sale of firearms and is predicted that it will surpass the illegal sale of drugs within the next few years. Let's see what that all means. For a case to be determined as human trafficking, and this is for persons that are over the age of 18, at least one element under each of these columns must be present. So you can think of it like this. A trafficker must take an action by the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of exploitation in commercial sex, labor, or services. Again, like I previously said, force, fraud, or coercion does not need to be present in the case of a minor. All that needs to be present is the action for the purpose of exploitation in commercial sex acts or labor services. Depending on the source that you read, numbers regarding trafficking can be really confusing and misleading. However, we rely heavily on specific sites such as the U.S. Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the Polaris Project, and Shared Hope International. Currently, around 80% of trafficking victims are female and 20% are male. We feel that possibly that 20% may be underreported just due to the way that young men feel in reporting sexual assault against them. Cases of human trafficking have been reported in all 50 U.S. states, and roughly 83% of the cases reported in the U.S. are U.S. citizens. The U.S. Department of Justice reports that right now the current age of trafficking victims is 13, and the entry into trafficking is 12 to 14 for girls and 11 to 13 for boys. Unfortunately, the only statistic that seems to be declining is the age of the victims. Although the vast majority of our work is with young women who have been victims of commercial sex trafficking in Tennessee, we do see some cases of labor trafficking as well. In the news, you may have seen arrests that have been made in connection with massage parlors and nail salons, and these are examples of both labor and sex trafficking, where victims are forced to work long hours for little or no pay. They are often housed together in one location, transported to and from work by their trafficker, and know very little about their surroundings. They can't tell authorities where they have lived or even what community they have lived in. And you can see that in situations like these, it is very difficult to escape, and these victims certainly do not have freedom of movement. Their money and documentation are taken by the trafficker, and they are told that they will be deported if they tell law enforcement. They are dependent on their trafficker for everything, and they are monitored at all times. Human trafficking is a low-risk, high-reward business. Not only is it extremely lucrative, but it's far less risky than selling guns or drugs, and it's much harder to detect and prosecute. It's really easy to see why commercial sex trafficking is more lucrative than drug trafficking. Drugs cost money to produce and can only be sold one time. A trafficking victim can be sold multiple times a day, sometimes 10 to 15 times a day, 6 to 7 days a week. And you can imagine how traumatic that is if the victim is a minor. Additionally, it's hard to detect. Victims are trained to say that they are willing participants. So, let me give you an example. If a police officer stops a car for speeding, and he or she has reasonable suspicion to search the car for drugs, if they find drugs or paraphernalia, they have hard evidence that a crime's been committed. Then, say if the same officer stops a car for speeding that's carrying 3 young women, it's easy to explain away why the man might be traveling with 3 female companions. And it's hard to prove that the women are there by means of force, fraud, or coercion. These victims are threatened with violence or worse against themselves, their families, or their friends if they say anything. So law enforcement officers don't always know what to look for, and therefore trafficking may go undetected in plain sight. Let's look at the impact of human trafficking on children. The TBI, in cooperation with Vanderbilt University, did a study and released a report on sex trafficking of youth in our state. The study unfortunately validated that trafficking is happening at alarming rates right here in our own communities. As you look at the map, every county in red reported at least one case of sex trafficking of a minor. And keep in mind that a case does not mean just one victim. It all depends on how successful the trafficker is. 4 of those counties reported over 100 cases in a 2-year period. Currently, 94 to 110 minors are trafficked each month in Tennessee, and that doesn't include those that are over 18 who are trafficked. Sex trafficking is just as prevalent in the rural areas, suburbs, and small towns as it is in urban areas, due in part to parents who also sometimes will sell their children for drugs or alcohol. This is referred to as familial trafficking. Traffickers target vulnerable populations, and the vulnerable populations in the United States include children in the child and welfare system and juvenile justice systems, runaways, homeless youth, persons with disabilities. They are also strategically recruiting victims from just about everywhere that youth are found, including the schools, malls, parks, bus and train stations, airports, shelters, and particularly from foster or group homes. It is estimated that an estimated 60% of youth trafficked in Tennessee have been in the foster care or the juvenile justice system at some point. The LGBTQ community has also become another target. However, victims can come from very affluent areas as well. We have worked with youth from virtually every zip code in Middle Tennessee and several beyond our service area. Anyone can be a victim. The one characteristic that most often unifies all victims is the need to belong, to feel loved, to have a social safety net. Children that feel that they are loners, on the outside, new in town, or victims of bullying, these are the ones that traffickers most often prey on. Traffickers use various lures to ensnare their victims. Boyfriending is the most common tactic. Charming guy will come along, sell a dream, love, marriage, home, and then sell them for sex. Some victims have been drugged at parties unwittingly and woken up to unimaginable horrors. Away from their home or unaware where they are, they lose contact with family, friends, or any support system that they maybe have, and become dependent totally on their trafficker for everything. Other victims have been lured into situations by the promise of a glamorous job. Travel the country, selling magazines and books, a college scout offering tryouts for international ball team, bogus contracts for modeling that turned out to be for a porn site. You get the picture. One local girl thought she was meeting with a record producer who was going to make her famous. She wasn't. They also prey on the vulnerabilities of a victim. And again, like I mentioned, someone that doesn't feel pretty, wanted, feels lonely, unpopular. Also, as was mentioned, they may be new in town or victim of bullying. Maybe they're a latchkey kid or their parents don't spend time with them. Social media has become a major hunting ground for exploiters. It is reported that approximately 76% of transactions for sex with a child starts on the internet. Teens often post things on social media that make them vulnerable to traffickers, such as phone numbers, addresses, what school they attend, passwords, and just overall generally loose privacy settings. They are also prone to talk about common denominators like what music they like, how their little brother is annoying them, or where they are on vacation. These factors make it easy for traffickers to form a connection with the youth, and before they know it, they've been quote-unquote friended by someone who is not who they thought they were. In general, it's common for teens to friend people on social media who they don't know in real life, and this practice alone makes them vulnerable to all sorts of predators. This slide right now is just an example of how that works, and this is at the time of this recording, this is a current case that is going on in Coffee County. About a week or so ago, prior to the recording of this, Coffee County issued a warning for parents about a cyber predator who was targeting young girls. And he had contacted several children within the county, had sent lewd messages to them, also had photos. Sheriff's office encouraged everybody to pay close attention and to their phones, and they were also encouraging parents to suspend their child's use of social media until the man was caught. In one post, the predator said, "I like girls only. My favorite ages are 12, 13, and 14. Plus, I could like younger or older girls too." He also specifically said, "The girls who I want to kidnap, they study in Coffee County Middle School, and they are in 8th grade." And he also went on to name 2 girls who he claimed attended the school. He had used different names and different aliases. And one of the things that one of the district attorneys in the area has said is chat forums, platforms for video games, especially those that have or invite multiple gamers. Those are sometimes the ones that are the most easy for predators to access. Basically, bottom line is nothing is off limits. Now that you know what human trafficking is and how it happens, let's look at how to identify victims if you encounter them in real life. If you first, I would take a moment and add the human trafficking hotline number into your phone contact list. You won't have to look for it and wonder how to find it when you do see a suspected trafficking victim. And that's 1-855-558-6484. That is the Tennessee Human Trafficking Hotline, and it's manned 24 hours a day. Some of the red flags of human trafficking are if is the person disconnected from family, friends, community organizations, or houses of worship. If it's a minor, have they stopped attending school? Does this person have signs of trauma and or abuse, particularly if there are bruises and cuts and they're in various stages of healing? Are they traveling with an older male that is not their parent or guardian? Do they have a history of being a chronic runaway? Do they have multiple delinquent charges? Are they homeless? Are they a substance abuser? Do they have tattoos such as the word daddy or other tattoos that would identify them as a property of another person? And we've also seen tattooed barcodes on victims. Do they lack personal possessions, anything that would be intimate or, like a Hello Kitty coin purse or whatever? Anything that they have is just the basic essentials. There are a lot more red flags, and if you're suspicious of someone who's being trafficked, and you want to know more red flags, go to our website, www.endslaverytn.org/redflags. Tennessee has made tremendous strides over the past few years in terms of awareness. There's more and more media coverage, and the public in general is more aware that human trafficking exists. Currently, we are listed as #1 in Shared Hope International's Protected Innocence Challenge for the services we provide and having the strongest human trafficking laws in the country. But there is still a lot of work to be done, particularly in protecting and educating our children and reducing the demand for younger and younger sexual partners. By focusing on the 4 aspects of the TAAP model, training, aftercare, advocacy, and prevention, we holistically address the issue of human trafficking. We embrace the victim-centered approach, and we encourage all agencies dealing with survivors of human trafficking to adopt a survivor-led model of trauma-informed care. All four aspects of this approach are vital to the fight against human trafficking. Training with professionals and community groups helps develop a better awareness of human trafficking and its impact on our city and state. In this way, victims of human trafficking can be more readily identified, and that empowers these communities to further help local law enforcement identify and assist trafficking victims in appropriate ways. Aftercare begins the minute a victim enters our program and thus becomes a survivor. We see to every aspect of care that is needed, from physical and dental care, mental health with acute and ongoing therapy, life classes, job placement, tutoring, and GED assistance, art therapy, exercise, nutrition, and financial planning. And we also focus on their personal life goals. Anything that is needed to give them the life that they have dreamed of is our mission. Advocacy work not only involves talking and working with strategic partners on the state level, but also on the federal and international level to strengthen laws that focus on the decriminalization of victims and stronger penalties for perpetrators. The fourth aspect of TAP is prevention. End Slavery Tennessee addresses prevention through intensive programs for high-risk youth populations, such as those that are in group homes and detention, speaking to the local court-mandated John School for men who have been arrested for the solicitation of prostitution, and advocating for stronger laws with our legislature. The average life expectancy, once trafficked, is 7 years, and this is from they are found dead from an attack, abuse, HIV, and STDs, malnutrition, overdose, or suicide. Those who survive usually end up self-prostituting and drug-addicted. We target the younger ones during their trafficking, trying to keep them from ending up on the streets and self-prostituting. Another area of our prevention work is demand abatement. As just mentioned, we speak to groups of men who have been arrested for solicitation of sex at the Magdalene John School, and that school is run by the District Attorney's Office. This school is for first-time offenders who solicit prostitution. These men are the buyers that drive this thriving commerce, and you'd be amazed. There have been silver-haired, distinguished-looking gentlemen, men who drive up Mercedes, teachers, coaches, as you previously saw on the slide. We see lots of wedding rings on their hands. Think of the numbers of men it takes to drive an industry this huge. There are people to go to church with, work with, live near, who buy children and youth for sex. And let me also point out, traffickers do not have to be men. There is a growing number of females that are also becoming traffickers. Pornography is also a major drive of the industry, and men want what they see portrayed, and there is currently a lot of pornography involving children out there. Recently, the Justice Department told Congress that the spread of child pornography, fueled by technology and the internet, is outpacing the efforts to combat it. The distribution of child pornography, the number of images being shared online, and the violence against child victims are at an all-time high. The only thing that has decreased is the age of the victims. Our culture increasingly thinks of children as sexual objects and making it seem normal. Take, for example, a look at popular culture, clothing, music, television, magazines, websites, the local toy store, and you'll find young people and children have been very sexualized. Traffickers, like business people everywhere, want what sells. So if they see that kids are in demand and command high prices, they'll turn to recruiters to get them. The average price currently for a minor is $200. And so we speak to these men about how their demand feeds into human trafficking. And we talk about how young people get trapped into forced prostitution and how hard it is for them to leave. And finally, we hope the information we share will help them make better choices in the future. A church or community that allows openness and honesty about temptations and sins, modeled by leadership, is a great prevention tool. Too often, Christians don't speak out on things like pornography and sexual addictions, and these feed into human trafficking. If a fellowship becomes a community where these problems are dealt with in a healthy way, and someone struggling with these issues can share their struggles honestly and find accountability and a safe place, we play an important role in preventing new traffickers and new consumers. On January 26, 2016, Nashville launched the first in-the-state court program called Cherished Hearts, and is dedicated to identifying and helping victims of human trafficking. This human trafficking court is one of only 5 in the country. Through the combined efforts of the District Attorney's Office, judges, prosecuting and defense attorneys, law enforcement, treatment providers, and others, this court works to restore those impacted by trafficking and prostitution to safe, law-abiding lives. Upon completion of the court's 3-phase program, which includes drug treatment and counseling, participants will have their cases dismissed and their records expunged. Several nonprofit organizations, including us here at End Slavery Tennessee, as well as the Sexual Assault Center, The Next Door, and Thistle Farms, will assist the court in providing aftercare. In 2013, Governor Haslam mandated the creation of the Tennessee Human Trafficking Services Coordination and Service Delivery Plan, and a statewide plan for delivering services to survivors of human trafficking. In coordination with this plan, Governor Haslam appointed the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to be the lead agencies for all human trafficking crimes in the state of Tennessee. The TBI then established a regional single point of contact system to ensure that quality services would be provided to human trafficking survivors in the most effective and efficient way possible. This means that a non-governmental organization, an NGO, has been designated as the official single point of contact, SPOC, in each of the 4 Tennessee Bureau of Investigation divisions. This model helps coordinate comprehensive services across the state for human trafficking survivors. This partnership is called the Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance, or TASA for short. Each of the 4 single point of contact organizations receive all human trafficking referrals in their designated region of Tennessee, and they coordinate services to meet the needs of each individual human trafficking survivor. These organizations work collaboratively with one another and with other nonprofits, direct service providers, and law enforcement agencies to accomplish this coordination of comprehensive services. The single points of contact for all human trafficking referrals in Tennessee are as followed. On the left part of the map, which is western Tennessee, the county's in blue, this is handled by the single point of contact Restore Corps, and they are housed in Memphis. In the middle is the yellow counties, Middle Tennessee, and of course that is handled and overseen by End Slavery Tennessee. The region to the right there in green is Second Life Tennessee, and their home offices are in Chattanooga. And the northeast part of the state, which is the counties are designated in orange, are handled by Grow Free Tennessee, driven by the Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking, housed in NASHVILLE. It may seem insurmountable when you think about the issues facing these young victims and the community as a whole. But trust me, we are seeing great progress in every person who knows that there is still trafficking and slavery today.